This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, John Bolton out. What does it mean? Backed by popular demand, Clare Lopez, Vice President for Research and Analysis at the Center for Security Policy. Clare, what an honor and a privilege to have you back.
Well, thank you, Jamie. I'm very glad to be back with you.
And it's great to have you. We've had you on a couple times now. We want to get all the wisdom that you have from you for our audiences. And Clare, before we go further, just so much that you have to share, what it says about the culture that we're in, that you are not on CNN, you are not on MSNBC, and even though we have nice things to say about Fox News, we still register the fact that you are not on that station either. Could you comment on that? What's going on in our culture?
Well, it's hard to know. Other people from the center have been on Fox recently. Fred Fleitz, our president, for example. Okay. And also just last week, Tommy Waller talking with Judge Janine about the EMP threat. So we're getting some visibility. Now we just got to get me in.
No, absolutely. And look, Fox News, thank God for Fox News. Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Judge Janine, as you said, just wonderful people getting the truth out. We got that. But there is an issue there nonetheless in terms of the subject of Islam, as we know. Something's going on at Fox News. We don't see Bridget Gabriel on there anymore. We know Judge Janine got quote-unquote punished, I guess you could say, for something that she dared to ask about Sharia and Ilhan Omar. But CNN, MSNBC just completely lost causes, correct?
They're just out in left field someplace.
Yeah. Sad that the truth is being stifled, and that's where the Glazov Gang comes in. So let's start telling the truth about the firing of John Bolton. So look, this is a little bit difficult for us at the Glazov Gang because we love Donald Trump. We also love John Bolton. Obviously, they're not seeing eye to eye. They did not see eye to eye. I thought that it was a great thing to have somebody like Bolton in the administration. I mean, compared to the Obama administration, where all we saw was the Muslim Brotherhood and its sympathizers. What's your reading of his exit out of the administration?
It's a little hard to tell from the outside, of course. The reports that we see in the media, are that President Trump and his National Security Advisor Bolton clashed over a number of things. We'll note that the announcement of John Bolton leaving the administration came right on the heels of the revelation that President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo were planning to bring the Taliban out to Camp David. Don't know if that really had anything to do with it. It was the last straw. But in some ways, it might free up Ambassador Bolton to pursue policies, to pursue his own interests, for example, with Iran and with Iranian opposition, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, which he supported for so many years, perhaps in a freer way.
Okay. Fair enough, but okay, where could I start with this? Let me see. Okay, look, Clare, let's just deal with Afghanistan in terms of where we kind of can gauge where maybe Trump and Bolton might stand. I think we've got the vibe from Trump overall that I think he weighs a little bit more towards the isolationist, non-interventionist disposition. I think we could say, even Trump has said that perhaps Bolton is a quote-unquote hawk. I don't know what words we want to use, but we know that Bolton is a smart guy in terms of that stuff and is a tough guy, and we need toughness. So now I have mixed feelings about Afghanistan, and maybe I don't know a lot either. So on the one hand, we're in this war for 18 years. And whether we fought it right or wrong, the bottom line is we're there for 18 years. American boys and girls are dying. Men and women are dying. American lives are being lost. American treasures being lost. It's 18 years. We just got to get out of there. At the same time, if we don't get out of there correctly, disaster. So, but not to talk too much here, but for Trump to invite the Taliban to Camp David and not even to invite the Afghan government into the talks, something's very wrong there. At the same time, maybe he just wants to just get this thing over with and just get the hell out. What's your reading?
You know, I have to agree with you, Jamie. I was absolutely appalled when I heard for the first time, like many of us, that the president was thinking of bringing Taliban jihadis, not just onto American soil 3 days before the annual commemoration of 9/11, but to Camp David. I know that the president, has a strong sense of confidence in his ability to reach deals. We see this with regard to North Korea. We see it with Iran, even, and we're seeing it with the Taliban. I think the problem with this, though, is, as you've said, Jamie, we have been in Afghanistan now since late 2001. We're coming up on 18 years very soon. And in all of that time, we've not budged. And if you keep looking at the map of Afghanistan and the area, the territory that the Taliban either controls or threatens, that amount of territory is doing nothing but growing. And I think we mentioned, maybe on one of the earlier shows that we did, that in fact, when the United States Department of State helped the Afghans to write a new constitution, which came out in January of 2004, that constitution put Afghanistan under Islamic law, unequivocally under Islamic law. What is the enemy fighting for? There is no jihad enemy on the face of the earth who ever said, I am fighting in the cause of violent extremism in order to impose violent extremism on the world. No, every last one of them says, we're fighting to enforce and impose Islamic law. So we gave this to them now nearly 15 years ago.
Absolutely. And what a waste of American lives and of American treasure. Claire, again, I have to reiterate, I think Donald Trump is great. I thank God every day that Trump is in office. Wonderful president. But we have to tell the truth about maybe some things that he might not see too clearly. He made a statement afterwards, something along the lines of, well, the Taliban's going to lose out here because, now because of this mistake of theirs or whatever, however he said it, now we're going to have to fight another 10 years or so, or something like that. And then the Taliban, of course, responded and said, forget about your 10 years, we're ready to fight another 100 years. There seems to be Trump doesn't really understand. Like when Trump said that, I can't remember how many years he said, but he said something like, well, now they're stuck fighting another 10, 20 years. Mr. President, President Trump, these people are ready to fight for thousands of years. This is what they do. And there's somewhere where he may not be seeing that very clearly, Claire.
I totally agree, Jamie. I think, we were back and forth a bit before the program on some of the things that we might want to talk about tonight. And one of the things that I mentioned is that we maybe should be taking stock here, 2019, 18 years after 9/11, of where we are, and are we in a better place national security wise today than we were on, let's say, September 10, 2001? And I have to say, no, we're not. We're in a worse place. We're in a less secure place. Why? Well, I think the answer is twofold, and it's interrelated. The first reason is that we have never, ever identified, acknowledged, named the enemy. The enemy is the forces of Islamic Jihad and all who support them. The Islamic movement literally is what they call themselves. The second part of this is that in all these years since then, and really going back before 2001, the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States and its front groups, in particular CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council, so many others, have been so successful at infiltrating really every sector of American society, but that includes our national security. And there's something that many of us call the Great Purge. And that means that during this period of time we're talking about, all references to the connection, the inspirational connection, if you will, between the canonical sources, texts of Islam, doctrine, law, scripture, and Islamic terrorism, been removed from the speech, from the writing, from the curriculum of every agency and department in the U.S. government, to include the military and all of the rest.
Claire, I want to interrupt you there because we know that Obama instigated all that. We know that John Brennan and all those other individuals oversaw all that. And because of that, because that threat assessment could not be made, when the FBI was warned about the Tsarnaevs and all the information that had come out or was available in the other instances, the people who did that purge have blood on their hands. Because if there had been a proper threat assessment, if people could have been investigated properly, the Tsarnaevs would not have been able to do what they did. The San Bernardino, we know, especially with what Phil Haney has disclosed in terms of Saeed Farouk and Tafshin Malik, would not have been able to do what they did. The people who oversaw and enabled that purge have blood on their hands.
Yes, I do. I have to admit, though, that this purge began long before the Obama administration. Very shortly after 9/11 itself, we saw President George W. Bush in the great big Islamic Center of Upper Northwest Washington, D.C., intoning Islam is a religion of peace. And if we remember the photographs from that day, do we remember who's standing like 3 inches off his left shoulder? It's Nihad Awad. Mm-hmm. Nihad Awad is standing there.
Well, Claire, I think that they got rid of Stephen Coughlin during the Bush years, correct?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
They did, exactly. And that was the beginning of it. We saw the beginning of the purge of the language even at that time. If you cannot name your enemy, you certainly cannot formulate an effective strategy to fight and defeat that enemy. And that's where we are.
And they have blood on their hands. And Stephen Coughlin, look, I recommend to everybody watching this program, Catastrophic Failure, the book that Stephen Coughlin has written, just a masterpiece. He has shown many things, but especially how the Muslim Brotherhood has penetrated the U.S. government and our institutions, and also with the enablement of the Obama administration and, of course, beforehand. But Claire, Stephen Coughlin said something very important in that book, and of course elsewhere. It's not just making, what a threat assessment is what your enemies believe in, whether it is even correct or not. In other words, because a lot of people say, oh, well, that whole argument that it's just a misunderstanding of Islam. The jihadists are misunderstanding their peaceful text. We know that they're wrong and that that's BS, but even if they were correct, which they're not, it doesn't matter, because it's what the jihadists believe that we have to take into consideration, not whether they're correct or not.
Absolutely, a terrific point that Steve makes over and over. Exactly right. Now, it is striking, I think, and John Guandolo makes this point in the classes that we sometimes teach together. He makes the point that, isn't it striking that over all of these years, all of the jihadis misunderstand Islam in exactly the same way? I think Robert Spencer made that point too.
So many of them are just misunderstanding this religion. Can't figure out all these misunderstanders. Claire, now another thing in terms of, look, here's 18 years. I think that there was a certain, obviously I'm not speaking for all of us, but this nation was so traumatized by 9/11 that there had been a certain Stockholm syndrome that set in, and the enemies won on that level. And you alluded to this earlier. We're so much farther behind. I was even watching some of the news programs. Some of them are even saying 18 years later that planes hit the buildings 18 years ago.
New York Times.
Yeah, they're referring to planes. We have been so indoctrinated and so traumatized that this nation, and the left, of course, that rules this nation, and the Muslim Brotherhood that operates with them. But there's an indoctrination that we've surrendered to. Correct?
I would have to agree. I mean, that I think it was a lead paragraph from the New York Times, and it said something to the effect of airplanes took aim at the World Trade Center buildings. No, planes did not take aim. Those hijackers, those Islamic terrorist hijackers who hijacked the planes, took aim and flew them in buildings. But yeah, you're right. The reluctance to name the enemy for fear of, I don't know, being called names, I suppose, or maybe not getting invited to all the best parties, or missing out on the A-list. I don't know. But there has been an increasing, incremental, it feels inexorable move towards less and less honesty, less and less openness and frankness. And this really concerns me because I also follow events in Europe, and I can see how things have progressed over there. Yeah. In Western Europe, I will say, not so much Eastern, but Western Europe, to the point that, an Elizabeth Savage Wolf can be prosecuted all the way to the European Court on Human Rights for merely saying something to the effect of, well, Muhammad, if he, as is counted in the Sirah, in fact married a 6-year-old, what do we call that, she said, if not pedophilia? For that she was prosecuted. Yeah. This kind of language policing is already in effect in places in Western Europe, like Britain, like Germany, and other places. And I'm concerned that we here are following in the footsteps and are only a matter of years behind them in terms of even legislating or criminalizing free speech if it offends.
Well, Stephen Coughlin documented all this. Claire, if Hillary had won, I think a lot of us for sure would have all been in jail by now, because Hillary Clinton had made promises, to those forces, to the Islamic forces, that if she got into power, she would be trying to institute UN Resolution 1618, as we very well know. She was going to try to bring that all here in terms of criminalizing. Now, we know that in terms of that resolution, it's to defend religions, but really what it's all about is criminalizing any truth-telling about Islam. And Hillary and the Democrats were going to try to institute that here, correct?
Yes, absolutely correct. That solution, has not, thankfully, yet been implemented here in the United States, but it's very much still a part of the agenda of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. It's the 57 member head of state organization of Muslim countries in the world. And their agenda very clearly still, and here also, not just them, but in collaboration. And we see this in Western Europe. We see it with Steve Coughlin and Elizabeth when we've been to the meetings of the OSCE, Organization of Security Cooperation in Europe, not just on the Islamic cooperation OIC side of things, but in collaboration with the hard left, in collaboration with forces of communism, Marxism. And we see that red-green axis. Jim Simpson talks about this and has written a book for us at the center about it too. In collaboration, the red and the green are both taking aim at free speech. That is the number one objective, because if free speech can be shut down or even curtailed to the point that it is in Europe now, we are lost. And thank goodness for our First Amendment. Nobody else has that, although Canada has something similar in its Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but Western Europe does not.
Right, Claire. And so look, 18 years later after 9/11, we have people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib sitting in Congress. This means that American citizens voted these people in. This is quite telling. Let me ask you this. In terms of some of the statements Ilhan Omar has made about 9/11, just atrocious, and other things. Let me ask you, who is Ilhan Omar?
Ilhan Omar is an immigrant from Somalia. She has become an American citizen. She left Somalia, as I understand it, about the age of 9 or so, and went with her family, fleeing chaos and warfare there, to a refugee camp in Kenya, where they remained for a few years, and they were then somehow selected to and allowed to come into the United States. She and the family, well, some of the family, perhaps some of the other part of the family might be in England, except the brother that may be Sherry, but we're not quite sure about that, settled in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. And there is a district there, I think it's just 10 that she represents of Minnesota. That district encompasses the city of Minneapolis, and within Minneapolis, and some of its suburbs. The city of Minneapolis includes a neighborhood that is very often called Little Mogadishu. And it is a neighborhood I've been to. I've seen it, I've driven through it. And it's bounded by 2 streets, Cedar and Riverside. And it is almost 100%, if not 100%, Somali immigrant refugee population there in that city, in that area. That's who elected her. She became first a legislator in the Minnesota State Legislature. It was as a Minnesota State Legislator that now congressional representative Ilhan Omar, by the way, met one-on-one with the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in New York City, on the outskirts of the UN General Assembly back in 2017. That was an interesting meeting for a state legislator at the time. In any case, she was elected from that district.
Claire, what is Ilhan up to?
Well, she represents the people sent her to Congress, right? And those people are the people of Minnesota's 10th district, including an overwhelmingly Somali population of Little Mogadishu, which unfortunately has become known as a source of all things. I can't even imagine that this come to be a source of jihadis going from the United States over to Somalia and also other places to join outfits like Al-Shabaab in Somalia or the Islamic State.
But this was all deliberately choreographed by the Obama administration. This is no coincidence.
Well, she certainly rose very quickly, from state legislator, meeting with the head of state, the Turkish Muslim Brotherhood Jihad neo-Ottoman president, Erdogan, and then becoming elected in 2018.
Right. No, I just mean all the people who settled there and how everything played out, that this is all part of an agenda.
Yes, I see what you mean. Well, yeah. Right. So again, I'll reference a friend and colleague, Jim Simpson, who has written about this in a small monograph called Red Green Axis 1, the first one for the center. And he describes how there is really, it's a racket of voluntary organizations, sometimes called VALEGs for short, that are very often faith-based. Methodist, the Lutheran services, the Catholic Charities, the Hebrew Aid Society, all of these different groups, which receive very large percentages of their annual income from the U.S. government in return for settling refugees in various places. That's how so many of them got to those places there in Minnesota.
Thank you so much, Claire. Look, 18 years later, so much trauma in the United States, so much surrender, so much self-censorship, and a lot of delusions. And one of these delusions, and of course we know that the Unholy Alliance feeds this as well. And when I say Unholy Alliance for our audience, of course, hopefully you know by now that this is the left working with Islamic Jihad. But one of these illusions we have is this premise that the Shiites never ever work with the Sunnis. The Shia and the Sunni, they can never work together. But I think that facts and historical evidence tell us otherwise, correct?
Absolutely right. I think we've talked about this a little before, and with reference specifically to 9/11 and how we discussed that the attacks of 9/11 were brought to us by a collaboration among Sunnis and Shiites, specifically Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, Saudi Arabia, which are all Sunni, and the Shiite regime of Iran and Hezbollah. And they joined together, as we'll recall, as recounted in the 9/11 Commission report, joined forces in a terrorist alliance back in Khartoum, Sudan in 1990, in the early 1990s. So what people have to understand is that, I don't know, think of maybe a sock on the deck of the USS Enterprise playing that three-dimensional chess. So on that lucite board, right? So at one and the same time, Sunnis and Shiites can be happily slaughtering each other on various battlefields, and they do. But at the same time, at a more macro level, they divide the world into Dar al-Islam, that part, the rule of Sharia, Dar al-Harb, house of war, the place not under Sharia, and that level, they will come together in an effort to bring the Dar al-Harb into the Dar al-Islam.
Claire, in terms of Iran, which is your specialty, and before we talk about Iran, you know, this often needs to go without saying because it's such a given, but we have to constantly remind people of these facts. For instance, even me being from the Soviet Union, what a huge difference there was between that Soviet fascistic communist regime and the Russian people. And so when we talk about Iran, there's the Tehran regime that's evil, and you know, this is the Islamic Republic, and yet the Iranian people, I think it would be fair to say that the overwhelming majority who hate that regime, who are actually very pro-American and very pro-freedom and wonderful people. And I don't think you can find many more wonderful Iranian people or people from Iran than our own producer, Annie Cyrus, who's fighting for freedom and on behalf of people suffering under Sharia and also that are victimized by jihad. She's fighting this war daily. And so we have to keep reminding the world that this is the Tehran regime and not the people. Now, why I'm saying that, I'm going to follow up in a second because of how important it is to try to enable Iranians to rise up against that regime. But before we hit on that, this regime, Claire, I think today, because especially of the Obama administration, feels a sense of impunity. What can we do to change that around?
I agree, because this regime has never been held officially accountable for their role and the role of Hezbollah, their Shiite terror proxy, in the attacks of 9/11. I mean, really, nor for other things like the 1983 attacks on our embassy and Marine Corps barracks, the other attacks using proxy Shiite militias in Iraq, with the explosive devices, car bombs, EFPs, explosively formed projectiles, in Iraq, for which Iran was responsible, never held to account for any of that. Hezbollah has been training Taliban since well before 9/11, never held to account for any of that. Yes, I think you're exactly right that there must be a sense of impunity, that they've not been officially held to account. And they must be. It is time, it is long past time, they must be.
You know, I really like when people tell me how I'm right. And you've said that several times this program, Claire. I think I'm going to keep inviting you back. But Claire, when the Iranian people were rising up against their oppressors, as we know back in the day, and they do so repeatedly, there were some crucial moments. I think that Obama could have come out and really said something. And one of the excuses was, oh, well, if America does that, then the opposition will be branded as working with the CIA or something. But when Neda was shot in those streets by those snipers, and Obama remained silent, and that was a moment when he should have said, we stand with Neda, we stand with her family, we stand with the Iranian people. Do you think that Trump should come out and take verbally, very strongly, stand with Iranian people, stand with those Iranian women that have the courage not to wear the hijab and are going to prison, are being raped, or being executed? Do you think the American president should take a very official, loud stand, or do you think that might be counterproductive?
No, I think that he should take that very definitive stand in favor of the Iranian people. When we were looking at the 2009 uprising, as you were just mentioning, during the administration of President Obama, the people in the streets, they were marching with signs. And some of the signs in Farsi said, Obama. That's kind of a play on Obama's name, but in Farsi that means, it was a question mark. He is with us, and obviously he was not with them. Let me mention just very quickly, the Iranian people are Persians, at least many of them, at least half of them are Persians, but the entire area was overrun by the armies out of the Arabian Peninsula way back in the 1st century after Islam. They were Zoroastrians, and some of those traditions are still proudly kept. Certain poets, Hafiz and Ferdowsi, made a point of their writing to make sure they did not use Arabic words. They saved the Persian, the Farsi language. They're very proud of their origins and their 2,500-year-old culture. It is the people against the regime, absolutely. And I'll remember one more thing for everybody, and that is during the Cold War, we might remember, or I guess it was really after the Cold War ended, and some of the dissidents, you probably know this, Jamie, like Andrei Sakharov, were finally out of the prisons. And they said, Anatoly Sharansky, they said, word got to us when we were in prison that President Reagan spoke our names, and President Reagan called out the Soviets as the evil empire. And that gave us such courage, such encouragement that we were able to carry on. The same thing, without the 101st Airborne or anything like that, just the words of the United States president speaking in support of the Iranian people would mean the world to them.
Absolutely. And so we have so many names to mention. I would just even say Nasreen Sotoudeh, the Iranian lawyer, and she's been sent to prison now for standing up and defending and trying to defend Iranian women, especially in cases of not wearing hijab and etc. And she's been put in prison. We need to be saying all these names constantly, every day. So Claire, you believe that Washington, President Trump, that there should be an open U.S. declaration in support of the Iranian people against the mullahs, correct?
Yes, I do. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to send troops over or invade, and I don't think that we should.
But imagine.
A statement of support, yes.
Imagine if the Iranian people overthrew the Islamic Republic. What an inspiration that would send throughout the entire Islamic world in terms of the people suffering there that want freedom.
Well, and what a difference it would make in terms of all the chaos that the Iranian regime is and has been fomenting, creating across the region. Yes. That would come to a crash end.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that if that also happened, there is a chance that Annie Cyrus might go back and become the president of a new Iran. What do you think?
Just let me carry a case or two.
Okay, we'll have to talk to her about that. And I know she's listening, and we will discuss this at another time, but that's a great vision for us. Clare Lopez, how would you like to end this discussion?
Well, I think what I would say is that as we reflect again on this very grim anniversary of 9/11, one more time, 18 years since 2001, I think we really need to take stock of where we are and why we are not winning. And I don't mean just in military terms in Iraq or in Afghanistan, but I mean, why has the United States and the principles of Western civilization, why have these not moved more forward? Why have they not triumphed? Instead, they are being pushed back everywhere we look. Why is that happening? And I think by taking stock that way and being honest and open about who is the enemy that we face, and if it's multiple enemies, a red and a green axis, we need to say that. We need to speak about that. We need to formulate and then to implement an effective counter-jihad, counter-state policy. And maybe by the next time that 9/11 rolls around, we'll be in a different place.
Goodness gracious. Clare Lopez, for all the people that have been watching on the edge of their seat, and they are in awe, and they are very, very supportive of you and want to help you more and want to get involved and be your cheerleaders and enable you, where do they go?
Well, the websites for the Center for Security Policy, centerforsecuritypolicy.org, shorter URL, securefreedom.org. And I might mention that I have my own blog on Newsmax, where I try to write occasionally, and of course at the Glazov Gang.
That's my favorite part, that last part right there. Clare Lopez, an honor and a privilege. Thank you for being on the Glazov Gang, and thank you for everything that you do. And you're also not just a noble woman and a wise woman, but also a very brave one. Thank you for everything that you do, Clare.
And thanks to you for all that you do.
Thank you for joining the Glazov Gang this evening. Please remember, we are a fan-generated program. So if you support and like what we do, go to jamieglazoff.com to support the show. We'll see you soon. Good night.